Hi guys, welcome to my channel Creatively Expressive. My name is Amy and in today's video I have 9 Country Cottage style DIYs that would be perfect for a tiered tray. On my channel I share DIYs, thrift flips, budget decor, and all things creative. To become a part of my creative family, all you need to do is hit that subscribe button right below my video. And don't forget to click the bell so you're notified every time I upload a new video. Now let's get into the video. For project number 1, I am using these 2 scrap pieces that I had left over from some 1/2 inch by 36 inch square dowels that you can find at Lowe's. Both of these pieces measure 10 and 5/8 inches long. For this project, I am also using 6 tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm taking one of the dowel pieces and I am trying to evenly space out each of the tumbling tower blocks alongside it. To make sure I glue the blocks where I just laid them out, I am making a small pencil mark on the blocks and on the dowel. Then when I go to glue these together, I can just line up my pencil marks. Now I'm going to use Starbond superglue to glue the blocks to the dowel. For the next step, I unfortunately forgot to hit the record button. Sorry about that, guys. All I did was add some glue to the other ends of the blocks that I glued to the first dowel, and I stuck them to the second dowel, making sure that my 2 dowels were lined up correctly. And now I have a cute little ladder. I'm going to use some antique wax to stain the ladder, and the way I like to do it is by brushing it on with a paintbrush, and then wiping off the excess with a baby wipe. Now I'm using this bar of beeswax to rub over my ladder to create a distressed look. You could just use a regular candle, but I didn't have one and my husband had this beeswax, so that's why I'm using that. So I'm just going to rub the wax over certain areas on the ladder. There is no rhyme or reason to it, it's just totally random. Now I'm going to paint the entire ladder with white chalk paint. When the white paint is completely dry, I will take a wet rag and start rubbing it over the ladder. The areas where I place the wax will rub off, exposing the brown stain and giving my ladder a nice worn and distressed look. And now this project is complete. What do you guys think? Stick around to the end of this video to see all of the projects together on my tiered tray. For project number 2, I'm using this sign that I got from Goodwill. I sanded the original wording off of it over a year ago and then ended up moving on to other projects. Originally, my plan was to repaint it, but I ended up really liking the way it looks sanded like this, so I'm just going to leave the paint as is. The sign is broken up into 5 little sections and I am measuring them so I can design a decal in my Silhouette Design Studio to fit into each of the sections. For this sign, I chose the Bible verse, Ruth chapter 1, verse 16, and I cut it out on permanent black vinyl. I'm going to use transfer tape to transfer the middle line to the sign first. Then I will use that same piece of transfer tape to transfer the rest of the wording to my sign, trying to center them as best as I can. Once I have all the wording transferred to the sign, this project is complete. For project number 3, I'm using this light up house that I found at Dollar Tree about a year or so ago. I have a ton of stuff in my craft closet, so I'm trying to use some of it up before I go buy more because I am kind of a craft supply hoarder. For this project, I will also be using a wood plank from Dollar Tree and a piece of vellum scrapbook paper that I got at Hobby Lobby. I don't like how the sides of this house sign are open, so I want to use that wood plank to enclose them. So I measure the sides and I mark my plank to that size, and then I use a utility knife to cut down the plank to pieces that will fit the sides of the house. And I originally showed you a square plank, but I ended up using a rectangular plank for this project. To cut the plank, I just run the knife over the pencil lines over and over again until it cuts through the plank. And the plank isn't very thick, so it doesn't take that long to do. The cut plank is just slightly too fat to fit into the space between the front and the back of the house, so to fix that, I just sand down the side a bit until it fits. Now I have 4 pieces cut to fill the sides of my house, and the top 2 are slightly shorter than the side 2. I trace the house onto the piece of vellum, and then I will cut that house shape out. Now I'm going to cut that piece a little smaller so that it will fit inside of the house. Then I realized that I would need to also cut the top off of the house-shaped paper too. And I'm just totally making stuff up with this project as I go, so bear with me. I tried fitting the paper inside of the house, and the little wood spacer pieces are getting in my way. And I can't really make the vellum any smaller because then it won't cover the word cutouts on the sign. So now I'm trying to remove the spacer pieces on the sides of the sign. The one side broke off completely, and the other side broke away from the front, which is all I needed for that side. I slide the paper into the house on the side with no spacer, and then I just lift up the second spacer to make room for the paper. Before permanently attaching the paper though, I need to paint the house. So first I am going to stain the house with some antique wax. I brush it on with a paintbrush and then wipe off the excess with a baby wipe. And I stain the side pieces as well. Now I want to use the same technique that I used with the ladder, but with celery green chalk paint. I started to paint the house, and then I remembered that I needed to rub some wax over it first. Now that I have rubbed the wax over it, I'm going to paint the front and the back of the house and the side pieces as well. When the paint is dry, I will take a wet rag again and use it to wet distress the house. I felt like I took off a little too much paint. So now I'm going to go back in with some more of the celery green chalk paint, and I'm using a stiff bristled brush to dry brush on some more of that green color. Now that the house is painted and completely dry, I can add in my vellum paper. I slide it back into the house, and then I use some hot glue to glue it into place. Now I'm going to use some Starbond super glue to glue the side pieces onto the house. And this is where I realized that the top spacer on the house is too close to the top edge of my house, making it impossible to get my side piece to lay straight. So now I am trying to carefully remove it without breaking the house. And I am using a pair of pliers to pull the spacer off. Now that I have the spacer out of the way, I can glue the side pieces in. I put lines of glue on the insides of the house, and then I slide one of the shorter pieces into place and hold it for about a minute, which is about how long it takes for this glue to dry. Then I will glue in the second top piece. Finally, I will glue in the 2 side pieces, and this project is complete. As you can see, the pieces don't line up perfectly, but I am okay with that. It's supposed to look shabby and rustic, so I think it just adds to the look. For project number 4, I'm using this small sign that I found at Goodwill for 99 cents. I took the sign outside and I sanded the wording off, and now I'm going to paint the entire sign with the color brown oxide. Then I am going to de-stress the brown paint by sanding it. I'm using a low grit or coarser sandpaper first. Then I go over it with a medium grit sandpaper, and then finally a high grit or finer grit sandpaper to smooth it out. I got this book of scrapbook paper at Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to use this paper from the pack for this project. I'm measuring the sides of the sign, and then I'm going to cut pieces of paper to fit on the sides of the sign. Now I'm using Mod Podge to glue the pieces of paper to the sides of the sign. I wait for the Mod Podge to dry, and then I use a finger sander to sand off the excess paper and also make it look distressed to match the rest of the sign. I am a huge country music fan, especially 80s and 90s country. So I decided to make a decal for this sign with a line from a song by Randy Travis, and I cut it out on white vinyl. I used transfer tape to adhere it to the sign, and then this project is complete. For project number 5, I'm using this heart sign that I found at Dollar Tree. I want to remove the paper picture from the sign, and I decided to try using a wet cloth to remove it. I take a wet cloth and I let it sit on the sign for a few minutes. It soaked through the edges of the paper, so I peeled off the top layer of paper and then I scraped off the wet edges. Then I placed the wet cloth back on the sign and I let it sit for a few more minutes to soak the rest of the paper. Then I scrape off the rest of the wet paper. I let the sign dry overnight, and then I just needed to do a tiny bit of sanding to make the sign smooth. Now I want to paint the center heart with a light aqua color. I have this small bottle of aqua chalk paint and I wanted to lighten the color up a bit. Since this bottle was pretty empty, I decided to just add some white paint directly to the bottle and then shake it up to make a lighter color. Now I'm going to paint that center heart with that color. I saw this heart at Hobby Lobby and I thought it was cute, so I decided to make something similar with my heart sign from Dollar Tree. So I cut out the same wording with my silhouette cameo on white vinyl, and I am going to use transfer tape to transfer it to my sign. And once I have done that, this project is complete. For project number 6, I'm using this sign that I got from Goodwill for 99 cents. and 4 of these finial dowel caps that I got from Hobby Lobby. I sanded the wording off the sign. The sides of the sign had this pretty paper on it, and my first plan was to keep that on the sign. So I take painter's tape and I tape off the sides of the sign. But when I went to readjust the tape, it tore the paper, so I scrapped that idea. I sanded off the rest of the paper, and now I'm going to paint the top of that sign with that lightened up aqua color that I used in the previous project. I wanted to have paper on the sides of the sign like the original had, and I found this piece in the pack of paper from Hobby Lobby that matched the aqua paint color. I traced the sides of the sign on the paper and then I cut them out. Now I'm going to Mod Podge the pieces to the sides of the sign. And when the Mod Podge is dry, I will sand off the excess paper with the finger sander. Now I'm going to take those finials and place them on the end of a dowel and paint them with the color brown oxide. And I'm just using the dowel to help me hold the finials to make them easier to paint. Now once these have dried, I'm going to use Starbond super glue to glue them to the bottom of my sign. And I'm doing this to add a little extra interest and detail to my sign and also to give it some added height. And I just love the way it looks with the little feet. Now, like I said, I'm a big country music fan, so I cut out this verse from a Blake Shelton song on brown vinyl, and I'm going to use transfer tape to add it to my sign. I left the small centers on the letters because I thought they would be easier to weed out after I had the decal stuck on the sign. So I'm going to weed those centers out, and then this project is complete. For project number 7, I found this bird at Goodwill. I love the bird, but the purple color doesn't match my decor, so I thought that I could just repaint it. I want to paint it with chalk paint, but I thought it would be easier to do if I covered it in a coat of matte spray paint first. So I take it outside and I paint it with some white matte spray paint. And now that I have a nice matte base to work with, I am going to paint the bird with the celery green chalk paint. So I covered the entire thing with a couple coats of the celery green chalk paint. Now I decided to cover the bird with a coat of white finishing wax to try to make some of the details stand out a bit more. So I brush the wax on with a paintbrush and I wipe off the excess with a paper towel. And I am using a paper towel this time because I don't want too much of the wax to come off. At this point, I felt like the white wax wasn't standing out enough, So now I decided to try to dry brush some white chalk paint over the entire thing. I take a stiff bristled brush and I dip it into the white chalk paint, and then I tap most of the paint off onto my cardboard. My brush is mostly dry with just the tiniest bit of paint on it. I take that brush with just a bit of the paint on it and I brush it over the bird. And I just keep adding paint until I'm happy with the way it looks. And once I am happy with how it looks, this project is complete. It ends up having a bit of a stone look to it, like a statue you would see in a garden, and I really like that. What do you guys think? For project number 8, I'm using 2 little terracotta pots. I've been wanting to try mixing baking soda with paint, so I thought it would be perfect for this project. I add some baking soda to a cup, and then I mix in some white chalk paint. And I didn't measure it out at all, I just eyeballed it. Now I'm taking a chip brush and I'm using it to tap the paint onto the pots. And I make sure to leave some of the original terracotta showing through in some spots. This was really fun because I didn't have to worry about being careful or precise. And this also ended up being a really quick and easy project. At this point, I wasn't sure if I was going to put anything inside of the pots, so I went ahead and painted the insides too. I wanted to make the pots look like they had been sitting in the garden forever and the grass had stained the bottoms green. So I will use the color celery green with a big brush to dab that color over the bottom area of the pots. I didn't mix this color with baking soda because the pots already have the texture on them from the white paint. And I decided to have my pots laying on their sides, so I go ahead and paint the bottom area of the pots green as well. Now to add a bit more aging to the pots, I am going to dry brush / dab some antique wax over the pots. This will make them look a bit dirty and aged and like they have been sitting out in the garden. I dip the brush in wax and then I dab most of the wax off onto the cardboard and then I start dabbing the brush over the pot. And when there is almost nothing left on the brush, I will also wipe the brush over the pot. And I will just keep adding wax on until it looks dirty enough. I decided to fill one of the pots with some greenery. So I'm going to cut down some floral foam from Dollar Tree and then stuff it into the pot. Then to hide the foam, I will cover it with some moss. I picked up this greenery at Michael's recently for 60% off. I'm going to cut 3 pieces from it and stuff them into the center of my pot. Now that I've done that, this project is complete. For the last project, project number 9, I am using 4 of these mini house signs that I picked up at Hobby Lobby on clearance for $1.24 each. I am going to remove the sawtooth hangers and then sand the fronts off of these. Now I'm going to paint each of these front and back with white chalk paint. I thought that if I used white wax, which is kind of yellow, on these, it would make them look aged, like how some white objects yellow over time from age. So I'm going to cover each of these with a coat of white wax. I brush the wax on with a paintbrush, and then at first I wipe off the excess with a baby wipe. But I thought the baby wipe was taking off too much of the wax, so then I gave it another coat of the wax, and this time I wiped it off with a dry paper towel instead. And that ended up working out a lot better with giving it that yellowed look like I wanted. Now I'm going to use another sheet of scrapbook paper from that book that I got from Hobby Lobby. This time, instead of covering the sides of the signs with the paper, I'm going to cover the bottom front of the sign with it. I make the paper pieces 1 inch thick, and then I cut them to fit across the fronts of the houses. I paint a layer of Mod Podge on the back of the pieces of paper, and then I stick them to the bottom of the houses. When the Mod Podge is dry, I will sand off the excess paper, and then I will also sand along the edge of the houses to add a bit more distressing. I used the font X typewriter, and I cut out the word home in all caps on brown vinyl. And I am going to use transfer tape to transfer each of the letters to the houses, and then this project is complete. And now that all the projects are complete, here is my tiered tray all put together. What do you guys think? Alright, I have a question for you guys. I'm calling this look Country Cottage, but what would you call it? Is it Country Cottage, Farmhouse, French Cottage, Shabby Chic, or something else? Sometimes I have a hard time being able to tell the difference between these styles. If you know, let me know. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and it's inspired you to go create something new. If you did enjoy today's video, please help support my channel by subscribing if you haven't already, giving me a thumbs up, leaving me a quick comment, or even sharing this video with anyone that you think might enjoy it. Your support means so much to me and it helps my channel grow so that I can keep bringing you more ideas. I hope you guys have a great day and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!